So we are a little bit before 5, but let's start already. Welcoming our first guests now. I already see a few. I would say we wait a few more minutes, like 1, 2, 3 more minutes until we start with some content, and use the time now to set the stage. So let's start with very simple question, so that we all know whom we are speaking to. And so Laura, as ladies first, can you please tell us a little bit about you and where you're from?
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Flemming Schulte, and where I'm from has always been an interesting question, but I've lived the last 15 years in Munich. I'm originally from the US, from California, and today I'm actually in Florida. So my background is I've worked in e-commerce and in a lot of different industries that have been transformed by technology. And now I work as an independent consultant with tech companies and startups, helping them with go-to-market strategy and tools.
Thanks a lot. And please tell us one thing that almost nobody knows about you.
One thing would be, I actually started out my undergraduate studies as an industrial engineer, and it was a semester abroad in Vienna and trips down to Florence that made me change my mind and switch to art history, because I fell in love with the innovation ecosystem in Florence, that whole Renaissance Italy spin. And that's been the start of the innovation strategy and ecosystems in my life.
Nice. Florence is, what's the name of this old bridge again in Florence? Ponte Vecchio. Ponte Vecchio. Yeah, I proposed there last year. It was a success.
That was successful. Fantastic.
So I already told you something that almost nobody knows about me. So check. Yeah. So Juntae, please, your turn.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and good morning for me. My name is Juntae DeLane. I'm located in Los Angeles, California, in the U.S., and excited to to speak with you about the topic of building online events, virtual events for B2B. Just to let you know a little bit more about me, I am the founder of Digital Branding Institute, where it's a resource for all things digital branding. And I'm also the chief strategist and founder of Untitled DeLane, which is a Los Angeles-based digital agency. We serve clients in building their digital brands, doing everything from SEO to PPC, social media management, website development, and also strategy. I guess one thing about me that most people do not know, I actually started my marketing career as a DJ, as a college DJ, supporting local bands and artists and doing music marketing. And this was back when MySpace was the predominant social network. Yes, I'm kind of dating myself there too, but that's how I got my start. And then I branched out to doing products and services. And so I'm excited to speak here, and hopefully that experience will kind of showcase itself when trying to market some of your events. So looking forward to the talk.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Mm-hmm. And shortly about myself, so based in Munich, Sammy, my name. And my company, SAWOO, helps other companies drive sales through LinkedIn. So we help B2B companies find contacts and customers. And we also love to offer value and help, and that's why we do this webinar with you. And I'm going to share a short, so we don't have a lot of slides, so don't be afraid that I'm going to share something now. It's just to give you a short overview of what we're going to do. So we already talked about us. These are the 4 big topics we will cover now. So first, we will talk about the advantages of webinars over face-to-face events. I mean, everybody knows it's kind of hard, especially for B2B companies, because all the events are canceled now. And how do you get in touch with your prospects and build relationships? But we think even if face-to-face events would be possible, there are a lot of advantages that webinars have. We will talk about that. Then Laura will deep dive into how to adapt the event program for the online and webinar format. Juntae is the expert on how to select and engage and also leverage your webinar speakers. And we'll have a short look on how to execute such a webinar from A to Z. This all, I must say, is on a very high helicopter level, because on each of these topics we can spend like a webinar series. So gonna look forward to your feedback and see which topics interest you most, and we're gonna have a follow-up deep dive if you want to. And to give you also one other ask for the audience, you're able to ask questions anytime, and we will try to incorporate those so that it's not like a presentation, but more of an interaction. So yeah, let's directly dive into the first topic, advantages of webinars over face-to-face events. And I would like to ask both of you first, Juntae and Laura, what do you see as advantages?
Well, I think the advantages for webinars over face-to-face events, one of the big ones is cost. You can run a webinar for a lot less. You have also access to people across geographic areas. And I know, Juntae, you'll agree with this. One of the other aspects of it is, an advantage is it's a digital format. So you can reuse it, and you can also track how it's working. You can look at the metrics from this. And when we do face-to-face events, we don't have that as much. We can do some ROI on it, but it's more difficult. It's less tangible to see what the value coming out of the event is, at least to track it. I have some reasons why they're better, but we can talk about that in a bit. Yeah. Did I miss some? Which ones did I miss, Juntae? You've got some, I'm sure.
No, I think you're spot on, and just to piggyback off of what you're saying, even when you think about tracking your attendees in a physical event, traditionally people do that by scanning their badges and things like that, right? So if some people attended certain events, but you don't know how much information they retained if they left the events, right? You don't know if they have had some type of interaction with one of the sponsors, because sometimes people talk, maybe the sponsors will forget to tag them. And when it comes to determining the value that each of your sponsors are getting, this anecdotally, the sponsors would tell you how many badges were scanned, but maybe some event organizers may not be tracking that particular data, so they have to rely on that information coming from sponsors. So you'll be, by digitizing this process and doing online events, you would be able to see more data points so that you can add more value to your attendees as well as to your sponsors. So that certainly is a big difference there. And then the other is, you're naturally going to have an increase, in attendees and registration, because your event is on a digital platform. But I want to say there's a caveat there too. Oftentimes, because we're doing, as event organizers, doing these virtual events, it doesn't mean that your marketing should be laxed, right? It means that you have to promote your webinar or your online conference the same way that you would promote, if you were having a physical conference. So don't let the ease of the platform diminish your marketing efforts. And so if you focus on those things and promoting your physical event just like you would your marketing event, you're going to be able to collect more data on your attendees and share some of that data with your sponsors to keep both parties happy.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
I think one of the things you can do as well, with that idea of collecting data, I look at virtual events. They give you an opportunity to do something like what we call in product development, for innovation development. It's an MVP, minimum viable product. That's what we would take to the market. It's for testing and for getting feedback. And when you're in a virtual format, you can actually put out more types of formats, more types of content, and see what the reaction from your customers is. So you can gauge what would be of more value to them and whether or not the message that you have or the product or the offer is actually resonating. So I find it a very, very good format for testing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you can do like even a weekly webinar without too many costs. I mean, it still is more than you think. You will see in the end, in the last point, what you have to do for a successful webinar. But I like that point of being more entrepreneurial. And in these times where a lot of things shift, it's good to have the thumb on the market and know what's happening out there. And what I personally like a lot, because I like to find new prospects and help more people with my product. So in the end, you get data of potential clients, as simple as that. And you can use that in a way that adds value to all participants. And maybe you also get a future customer. So that's great.
I think there's one more that I would say, and this was one that surprised me, and I think surprises a lot of people when I mention it. But we think of virtual as, of course, it's distant from our customer. It's not that face-to-face, in-person meeting. But in a very strange way, it can actually be much closer to your customer, because in a lot, or your attendee, in a lot of cases, especially right now, you are in someone's home, right? With so many of us in our homes in a stay-at-home situation, you're actually in their regular day and in their home and have direct access with them through the chat or through an open meeting. So it can be a lot closer than you would think in a trade show where people are moving so fast, or a conference where you might not be able to speak to the speaker. You have access here. And it's one of the things that I learned coming out of my MBA program that had a lot of virtual learning and virtual presentations. It's incredibly connected in a surprising way. I don't know if you both found the same thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Cool. I just wanted to show one more slide, and then we here just to show you one example of what you can do of a long format of a webinar. If you record a webinar like we do now, and this is an example, a real life example. We recorded a webinar for a client for 60 minutes. And you can do a lot of things with this recording. You can create a podcast out of this. You can cut it into little pieces that add a lot of value. These video snippets, add your CI, and use this for whatever marketing you want to. I mean, we are experts in LinkedIn, so we use it for LinkedIn, but you can use it wherever you want to. You can create quotes out of this. You can write blog posts. So out of one webinar, you can basically create content for a whole week, depending on how fast and how often you post.
Right. It's fantastic for content marketing and thought leadership. Yeah.
And it's your own content. You don't have to just share a Harvard Business Review article like all the other 50,000, for example, management consultants are doing. You create your own content. And that is interesting.
Then, you know, from a differentiation perspective with your strategy in your competitive field, you have something that no one else has, and you control it. So it's a tremendous advantage in that sense in how you develop your brand presence.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So
drawbacks, though.
Just one short look at if we already have, because let me just stop the presentation for a second so I can have a look. No, we have no questions yet. So honestly, you are allowed to ask us, and we are not mean. We will answer your questions very likely. But let's go on to the next point. How to adapt your event program for a webinar format. So this is your field, Laura, where you are expert in.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think this is the other side of all of those wonderful advantages to virtual events. There are some real challenges and limitations, and when we understand those challenges and limitations, we can then look at which formats will work to address those and still achieve our goals. When we look at these face-to-face events, I think along with content and giving updates and information flow, we know we can do that in a presentation. We've all sat on the other side of webinar presentations. But there are some other really very important things going on, and there are things that are part of they're important to the go-to-market strategy for my clients. You're building trust in a face-to-face situation. You are strengthening customer relationships with a lot of those events, and you gain access to a potential pool of customers or stakeholders or partners or investors. These are really valuable interactions. Those can be difficult then to replicate in a virtual world. But here are 3 formats that work very well and are at least a starting point to see how you can convert to a virtual event. The first one, do you want to change the slide? The first one is the panel with Q&A, right? Okay, so with a panel, we're doing a great example of this right now. What we're doing is a panel event with question and answer. And I would say start with a title that's something like X ways to address challenge Y. And this is where you're looking at addressing a problem that's shared by all of your customers, by all of the customers or attendees or network of the participants. This is where you're going to invite 2 to 4 experts and then address that challenge. And you will actually achieve some goals. The goals you'll achieve will be, you'll have a chance to connect with your customers. That's really important. You have a chance to go out, talk with them, mention you're doing this event. You'll also be able to reach new leads. And Juntae, you can talk to this about how you leverage these different networks. And you demonstrate the range of what your offer is, your solution. Somewhat like a mini conference. But this is where we get to the limitations of virtual. You've got to keep it shorter. You've got to keep it very interactive. That's why we really are inviting you to go ahead and ask questions. And you have to keep it very focused and specific. So this would run like a mini conference, but it's much smaller. You address one problem only and have 20 to 50 attendees, I would say, in the webinar, depending on what you get comfortable with. Run it for 30 to 60 minutes because most of us can't sit too much longer than that. And do a Q&A about every 10 minutes during this program. That would be one really, really good format to start with. There's another that...
Oh, just so that, let's try to give an example of each. So what we are doing right now is exactly this here. So I invited both of you, and you're the experts on this topic. And yeah, that's what we are conducting right now.
You can even invite competitors. As strange as that might sound, you have some overlapping areas of customer base. You would be next to each other at a trade show anyway, and then you can show your differentiation in among those competitors. So there's a lot you can do with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also, just to add on to that as well, Laura, and I also think that could be a good thing when it comes to transparency and when you're disseminating information. You don't necessarily want your webinar to be solely about your company, right? But if you bring in some competitors as an example, then I think people are more receptive to your message because you're in a field with your competitors, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And you get the facets of issues or perspectives within the industry or the one common problem. Yeah, I think it's very useful.
Mm-hmm.
So we got one question from Laura. So her question is, so the Q&A every 10 minutes replicates a break that would happen in face-to-face, is the question.
Yes, I think it could, I wouldn't name it a break because a break means people go away. And as soon as people go away, there's a chance they might not be able to come back. I would look at it as a pause in the information you're delivering. And just like someone could raise a hand, if you're a speaker who says, just ask questions as I speak, then that's a way for your audience to interact. I've found that if your video audience isn't interacting with you, there's a chance they're not engaged. And so the more interaction you can offer, the more engaged and useful the information will be to your audience.
Perfect. So let's move on to the next one, shall we?
Okay, next one. This is a format everyone's familiar with from a different context, you know, coming from a content marketing, publishing experience background that I have. It's an interview. It's my favorite. because you control the stage. It's your stage. You ask the questions about the expert's background, trends, or topic outlook, and you've invited an industry expert to talk on topic Y. This is fantastic because it builds your credibility, just like being on a stage would be, presenting on a sponsored stage. It builds your credibility through association with the guest. It provides insight and access to this expert to your invited group of attendees, also extremely valuable. And it gives you a chance to win new customers through this audience. I do it maybe instead of a presentation because it's much more interesting to have the dialogue with an interviewee. And I think, Sammy, you and I were talking about how exciting it is who you can actually ask to be a guest. An example of this would be looking at one of the stages. You know, we've all had speaking engagements cancel, and maybe go to the hosts or the sponsors of those events and ask, would you like to come and speak on my virtual stage? And then you can interview them. You can get some amazing guests. And I do it with 5 to 10 questions and Q&A from guests to give those attendees access to this incredible expert. What's your experience been with finding speakers?
Can we park this question, because this is one topic that Juntae will answer in depth.
Great. Okay. So it's a bold one, and it's everybody needs the added opportunity to have a stage right now. And so I think this one's fantastic, one-on-one interview, and I use it a lot. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about that.
Well, I just wanted to add that this is also, I mean, this is a typical format I know from podcasts, you know. I mean, this is super simple to translate into a podcast. You just have to watch out that you don't use any slides that the listener or attendee needs to see in order to understand. But if you know that beforehand, and you directly have a podcast and a webinar, and you can use both. Right. And this is it's
actually a good rule of thumb even for the webinar, because a lot of people will dial in and it's just mobile, so they won't have an easy time seeing slides.
Yep. No, that's good. It's like the typical Tim Ferriss style. If anybody knows Tim Ferriss, famous podcaster. Good. Let's go to the next and last example you have for us.
And this one, I mean, this is something that makes sense as soon as you see it, because we all work with customer use cases and customer success stories. This is a format you can use in a webinar, and it's very, very interesting for the attendees. And it's something that customers will want to do too. How did customer Z solve X? You introduce them, and I would recommend they do 3 slides, the problem, the solution, and the result, and really keep it very, very focused. This is great for if you have a new product or a service launch. If you're looking for referrals, you're going to have an opportunity to do upselling to other customers who may not have used this innovation. And it's fantastic for relationship building. Your customers are thankful for the opportunity to present what they've achieved as well. So this is, I think, even more intimate, so smaller circle of attendees, and it's more like hosting a customer event. This is the thing where I would also open it up. I would use the meeting format rather than a webinar where the attendees aren't visible, but I'd have it be so everyone can talk and it's a smaller group, maybe 10 people max. But those are 3 simple formats you can work with for some first tries.
Yeah, definitely. And this is something that I find super interesting, because you can play with the guest list. You can either say, I just invite my current customers, and I introduce one of the customers who uses a new product, so you can use it for upselling. Or you can invite like hot leads to a panel where they speak about a certain problem, and one of the topics is maybe or one of the solutions is your product. So I like this a lot. It's really interesting. You can play a lot with this kind of format.
Yeah, we have a couple questions I see from Malcolm. Is everyone?
Yeah. I just waited until we finish this one, but we can directly start with Michael. I read it out loud. You outlined some advantages of webinars over face-to-face seminars, but I ignore the benefits of face-to-face over webinars. Surely the real answer is a blend of approaches. Who wants to start here?
You know, I'll go. So I think, sure, it's a blend of approaches, but I think it also has to do with the features of the webinar platform. that you have, right? And so some webinar platforms may have breakout rooms and things like that. Other webinar platforms may not. It may be straightforward as far as just streaming video content. And so it's ultimately best to have as much of a face-to-face interaction and replicate that experience through the webinar platform. So you can certainly say that it's a blend of approaches here, but you have to figure out, one, what are the features of the current webinar platform, and two, what are the general expectations of attendees that they would receive in the real world, and how can that be augmented by virtual, right? So that would be my answer to that question.
So basically, to just tell me if I understood it correctly, you can go much further than most people think with an online format. So you can really try to mimic a lot of things that you could do in a face-to-face event in an online format, and we are just scratching the surface right now. Did I get that one right?
Yeah. I agree with that. I mean, I think to say that we're ignoring the benefits of face-to-face, I don't mean to ignore those. There's something that I use as a very efficient, lean approach to gaining access to new markets, new business opportunities, assessing engaging contacts and leads in a pool of really easy to access people, right? So, and not only that, but face-to-face, you have an instant level of trust when you've met someone in person, because they actually exist as a physical being. I mean, it's just it's human nature. And you also have the stamp of approval of, oh, you've come to this event and so have I. And so somehow we are both legitimate people in this industry. There are all kinds of things like signals and cues that we get from these face-to-face events. And I don't mean to minimize those benefits. What we're trying to do is say, okay, we can't have those benefits right now, unfortunately. And they are real benefits. And how can we achieve some of these very important aspects for sales, marketing, credibility, brand through a virtual setting? And there are ways. Will I want to still do face-to-face events? Yes. But I think now when we explore how much more we can do, the additional that can come through virtual events and really push the limits that we're in here, not necessarily in the technology, we'll see that a blended approach is fantastic.
Yeah, and I can just add one point. I think blending is the right way to go as soon as we are allowed to do face-to-face events again, which might take some time. But for example, we are super successful in hosting meetups for us and our customers, where you meet, because sooner or later on the journey from being a prospect to a customer, you will usually in a B2B setting meet someone in person. And so, yeah, it's absolutely right. And thanks a lot for your question, Michael. And then we got a question from Greedy Bits. What rights need to be secured in advance to use content in add-on formats? Is there a standard best practice?
I think that's something where you'll, of course, just like at being recorded at a trade show event, I mean, that's something that the participants, you can have it in a contract if that's what you'd like to have. Juntae, you've done more of these. I know your digital event you did in January, pre-corona, just a digital conference that ran for a week with, what did you have, 50 plus speakers at the event? What did you find out about rights for that? I think you're the...
So what's interesting is sometimes it's often it's often better and faster to create your own original content. So that's the first priority. The second is, if you are looking to secure some rights, then it's really just working with the author of that content and make sure that you have written terms with regard to how that content is going to be used. You also may be able to find some what we call in the US, I think it's commons, where it's basically free royalty to use a particular piece of content. So you may want to find those outlets where you're able to take some content there. In the States, we also have different rules with regard to using content for educational purposes as well. So depending upon, the rules of your country or region, make sure you're up to date with that. But again, to just in summary, I would focus on first, probably creating your own original content. Second, trying to work with the content author to get terms on the use of their content in your event or format. And then third, looking at free ways or free content that you're able to use, or what we call royalty free in the US.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thanks a lot. So let's move on to the next interesting question: how to select, engage, and leverage webinar speakers, because everything stands and falls with really interesting speakers.
Yes. So, it's interesting because when you think about selecting speakers for your event, you have to understand that they are the main drivers of the engine around your event, right? I would say the first would be obviously the topic, right, that you're covering. But then you have to have great speakers to support that topic. And so I say great because great speakers for me are speakers that, one, are very knowledgeable about the topic, right? And that have experience both in theory as well as in practice, right? Those are two important things. And then the third thing is speakers that that have a following, right? Speakers that have an established brand. And the reason why you want to consider those types of speakers is because, one, they obviously can help to bring people to your webinar or to your event, right? Or they have some type of notoriety or name recognition. So those are all the things that I would consider when selecting a speaker. As Laura mentioned earlier, we had the opportunity to create a virtual event that was a 5-day virtual event with over 50 speakers. And it was a series of sessions as well as panels that were in the virtual format. And when we selected those speakers, Laura was actually one of the speakers there. And when we selected them, we wanted to make sure that we had experts that could take deep dives into everything from strategy to content to digital marketing, branding, and so on. And so you have to select speakers that can speak to your audience needs, and speakers that hopefully can bring a great deal of value from the knowledge and experience they have to sharing it with their network as well. So those are some things that I would consider when selecting a speaker. Now, once you have these speakers, you obviously want to keep them.
Okay, can I
Sure.
ask one question or in between, because it sounds obvious. You have a speaker that is recognized, has a big brand following, knows a lot of people, and is recognized in the industry. But how do you do this in practice? I can give you an example in a second, but I would just love to know, how did you do that? And what was your most prominent speaker, for example, just so that we get a feeling?
Oh, wow. I mean, I'd be remiss if I only named one. And we had some the opportunity to have some pretty great speakers, and these speakers are people who have written books, people who have worked with major brands, and so I wouldn't even want to put one in front of the other. But we had, I guess just to name drop a few people, we had Mark Schaefer, Neil Schaefer, Brian Fanzo, Carlos Gil. Is going to be on this next one. We had so many different people that are very popular.
And how did you get them? Because I'm very lucky you're not best friends with all of them already.
Well, I did have an advantage, being that I had relationships with them earlier on. And I think this kind of speaks to the point you may be trying to go toward, is that it's often best to develop relationships with speakers before you ask them to be a part of your event. And building a relationship can start with sharing their content, helping them to promote their book, or just supporting them in whatever they have, right? Maybe showing up on a webinar and asking a question, right? So that they remember you, getting their contact information, reaching out to them saying, hey, I met you here, really like what you have to offer. How about, I extend an invitation for you to come and speak at my event, right? People like to do business with people, right? And so if they know you, somewhat personally, then that makes it a little bit easier for them to join your event.
Yeah, I can give two examples. One that's absolutely in line with what you said. For one webinar, I commented on an interesting post of an HR executive, and after that we had a conversation, like a phone call, and I asked Nick Skinner, it was, if he wanted to join a webinar, because I think the topic that he was expert in is super interesting for other people I know. So that was one example that is in line with what you said. The other one is not in line with what you said. It's pretty simple. I attended a industry event, and I just asked the best speakers I saw if they wanted to be on my webinar. And up to now, my success rate is an amazing 100%. So it's something that I didn't expect, honestly. And we have one question from Geraldine, who asked, how much does it cost to engage an established speaker? I would just say, Geraldine, just try it out. You will be amazed on how much you get if you ask for it. And if you, of course, you have to offer something of value. So very likely, either your speaker offers something to your target group that he can sell, or she, or just wants to expand his reach. Yeah, and this is already value enough. So try it out. You will be amazed on what you can do.
Absolutely. And even if...
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
From my side, the way, I mean, we met briefly at an event in Los Angeles, and I really was on my way out. 2 seconds, we traded business cards. You contacted me later and asked if I wanted to speak at the event. And one of the main things that helped me say yes was that it was a virtual event. I happened to be in Los Angeles that weekend, and I wasn't sure where I was going to be at the time of the virtual event, but I knew if it's virtual, I can do it from anywhere. So it's easier for me to say yes. I don't have the expense or the planning or the scheduling of travel. And that's another reason why there often isn't in my experiences, there isn't a cost involved to have the speaker, because they don't have to lose time to attend your event, right? So that opens up, again, a whole range of speakers who would be happy to share your stage and have more awareness about themselves and reach your customers. You're bringing them your network, and that is a real value. So it made it possible for me. Plus, you were super nice and very organized, and it was a great lineup of topics that aligned with my services, so it made sense.
Absolutely. And having a virtual event is probably going to increase the odds that you would get a very notable speaker as well, because speaking to what Laura mentioned, it's just the ease of the use of the platform, right? Less travel, no travel, right? They can schedule it in a time period that works with them, depending on if it's pre-recorded or if it's live. And so you'd be surprised. You can get some pretty notable speakers simply because you're doing an online event. One other tip would be to, as Sammy mentioned, to provide value first and foremost. So if you have a speaker who is releasing some type of content, whether it be a book, a video series, or something that they really want to promote, they're looking for avenues to leverage so that they can promote their book or their service or offering. So if you come to them with some added value, say, I'm having an event about topic X, which will be perfectly aligned with your new offering of X, then how about we partner together and create this webinar where you can get your promotions, we can fill the needs of our target audience, and everyone is happy, right? So those are one of the approaches that you can have there when selecting your speakers. Now, some speakers may often still want to have some type of compensation. So if there's no budget there for you, then there's a couple things that you're able to do. One, you can potentially offer them the guest list for that particular event, which means that they would be able to get the email and contact information of all the attendees. And that could be enticing to that speaker. So now that speaker can follow up directly by adding that list to their emailing system, which is valuable. So you can use that as a potential leverage point. The other would be if they still want some type of compensation, then you can see if you can bring on a sponsor for the event. And sometimes, depending upon who the speakers are, you may have sponsors that really would want to join in on this event. So those are different ways that you can leverage sponsorship, leverage emails of your attendees, as well as just the promotion of their speakers offering for your virtual event.
Mm-hmm. Cool, thanks a lot, Juntae. We have a few questions, but I will park those questions until the end, I would say.
Tie into the question we had about, you want to do that one then? Okay.
Yeah, I would say we park those two questions, try to get through the last point, because then we have everything covered and we will be in time, which is always good because I'm half German at least. And then we use the time afterwards to answer these two and maybe other questions that pop up.
All right.
So yes.
So the next would be engage, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So once you have selected the speaker and that speaker confirms that they are going to be a part of your event, you're excited. Now let's figure out how to get the speaker excited about your event. So there's a couple ways of doing that. The first way is to onboard that speaker. And onboarding pretty much entails you making sure that the speaker has everything he or she needs in order to help promote the event, to become more familiar about the topic of the event, and so on. And Sammy's done a great job in making sure that communicating with the speakers for this event, making sure that we had all the information that we needed in the form of slides, making sure that if there's anything we wanted to add to the slides and to the event, all of those things were communicated, right? And so those are some of the things that you want to make sure you do, is make it as easy as possible for the speakers to engage in your event. So some of the onboarding tips here would be to provide them with speaker banners, which are graphic elements of the event that they can go and promote that on their social media. At the very least, the link, right, for that. If it's other platforms, whether it's LinkedIn, where you are able to create an event within that platform, sending them the link to that event so they can invite their friends, as Sammy did. If it's Facebook, it'll be the same thing, creating a Facebook event, inviting them there. Or if you have your own landing page, a specific landing page, then of course sending them that link as well. You also want to include swipe copy, and that essentially is text that they can grab, they can cut and paste into their social network or into their email database newsletter, where they can send it out to everyone that's following them. Again, that's helping to make it easier. So if they don't have to think about what to say about the event, and it's more time that they have to think about what to say, you can decrease that amount of time by just providing them with exact text that they can use to help promote your event. The other would be to focus on doing other types of creatives, and that could be a video. So there's other tools online tools that you can use to create videos for the event by plugging in the speaker pictures into the video. And that really gets them excited because it's a different piece of content that they would want to share on their social network. And people love videos, right? So we know that. And so if you can create videos for your speakers so they can promote it on their social network. There's also an ability to include speakers into paid advertising, which means that if you have, for example, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn ads, you can include the speaker there, and that if they're a high profile speaker, if they, their name or face brings some type of notoriety, then you can include them into those paid advertisements as well. And that's going to make them happy and want to get them involved. Another thing is, if you are aware of the attendees for each individual session, let's say, for example, that you're doing a virtual event that has many different sessions within, and you know the numbers of registrants for each individual sessions, believe it or not, speakers are somewhat competitive, right? So they want to know how many people have signed up for their session. And so if you let them know, and that's actually one thing that I did, is I would put it out in the email saying, hey, this speaker has X number of people signed up. This speaker has Y. And interestingly enough, outside of that circle, I hear things that are very competitive. And so they're going to want to make sure they have more speakers for their session. So providing the speakers with that information, I think, would be great. And that's like the best way I think that you can engage with speakers for your virtual event.
And then we all send another set of posts about the event out, and suddenly the numbers rise. I mean, it was really effective.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Absolutely. I think we had a question about that, or are we saving that to the end?
Yeah, let me just see. We have 4 questions now. Okay, I would say we park those questions. We will answer all of them. So no worries, we will answer them. But are you through with your topic? How to select, engage, and leverage, or do you have something to add?
So the last was leveraging your webinar speakers, and I think the most important thing here when leveraging your speakers is that your speakers can potentially bring in new leads. Right. And so can definitely consider that when selecting, engaging, and leveraging your speakers. So I pretty much leave you with that. I mean, that's probably the most important point with regard to leveraging your speakers, is that understanding that they can bring in new leads. So we can fast forward to the next session and kind of get into some questions and things like that, or whatever.
Yeah, I would just add one thing, because it's a question that we may be able to answer with just each one of us one short answer. And the question is from Mike Kass, with whom I studied at IE Business School. So Mike, you asked, what is something above and beyond, outside the box, or wow factor that you can offer in your webinar that could distinguish yours from many other webinars out there? Any examples from past experience? And I would say each one of you, please add one example. That would be great. Maybe ladies first.
You keep doing this to me, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, wow factor. I think this is an exceptionally good question, because it's true. There are a lot of webinars out there. And that's one of the reasons I was showing you some formats that help you do something other than, here are my 20 slides, now everyone listen to what I have to say, because it's not exciting. So how can you do a wow factor? You can think about concepts. This is something that comes out of advertising. I just did a webinar for AWS on how to market SaaS solutions. So AWS is Amazon Web Services, it's hosted services, and how to market SaaS solutions. Now this could be, here are my slides, everyone listen, take these points, I'll send you the slides afterward, and it goes in and it goes out. Instead, we had some fun with it, and we turned it into using superheroes to exemplify how you have these different superpowers you can get to market through a SaaS solution. So, is a superhero a super professional way to do this? No, but it certainly made it more fun. We got to all make ourselves into superheroes and, have our little icons and so forth. And it is a way to keep people engaged. And yes, you need a wow factor. You definitely have to do that. And if it's either, this is one of the wow factors, can be your expert. If you grab an expert and invite someone who you didn't think you would be able to have otherwise, that's wow. Your attendees will want to see that. But the wow factor will depend on who your audience is and what their interests and needs are right now. When we can consider how much has changed in the last few months, then we need to think about what are our customers' current challenges right now, because they're really different than they were 2 months ago.
And now we deep dive into a topic that we could have a whole separate webinar about, Laura. I'm sorry to be a little bit rude, but I try to get us back here because we still have some ground to cover. Juntae.
Yeah, so I think, Laura brought up great points here. I guess a different angle would be technology. The technology that you use. As we continue to advance in technology, you want to make sure that you're able to leverage the latest. And many attendees may not be aware of all the things that they're able to do in the virtual format in regards to events. So one would be speed networking as an example. So there's tools out there that will allow you to speed network, basically have 1 to 2 minutes of camera time with each attendee within a group or cluster that you have for your event. So leveraging that technology, I think, is something sort of outside of the box or above and beyond. There is even, augmented reality events, right? I mean, you can even consider those as well. And it's just shows that it's a unique event, not based on the topic necessarily, or even the theme, but also just the technology that's used for that event.
Perfect. And you already answered the question that Huang had. I just read it, but you already told us the answer. Wait a second. Oops. In a global bank, we had many meetings in both face-to-face and digital forums. Costs and reach were the biggest benefits of digital, and in face-to-face, the biggest benefit was the interpersonal engagement before and after the meeting. How could you enhance the interpersonal engagement in digital? And you just named one of the tools you can use with these one-on-one short dating sessions you could do, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, other ways to enhance that interpersonal engagement would first have to be, just starting off the meeting or the event with some personality, right? And making sure that people are able to showcase some of that personality by asking interesting questions. Like Sammy, you mentioned earlier, what is one thing that people may not know about you? And so that kind of breaks the ice and makes it a little bit more personal, so that there's a connection that's generated with that person that's on the screen, or at least some type of affinity or affiliation. So those are some small ways to increase that interpersonal aspect.
Perfect. And
the one with the interview format where I mentioned using a meeting rather than a webinar setting, my experience running those meetings has been that they're very connected because the participants can see who else is there and can actually have a dialogue with each other. It's a smaller group, so you have to limit your invite list, but that creates that. I think what you're doing right now with LinkedIn groups, that kind of thing, after the event, you find out who's interested in a topic and you can build those. And then there's always WhatsApp. Some WhatsApp groups with a particular topic can also be very useful. So they're pretty simple ways to get started and still get those connections before and after the event.
Perfect. And I will add something that's a little bit contradicting to, I'm absolutely with both of you. You can find a lot of ways for the wow effect, but I also think it's like in sports. You don't have to have a perfect session every time you work out. Consistency beats everything. Yeah? And if you consistently put out a webinar every week, you will outperform all the other webinars that have one wow effect every 6 months. So I honestly think stick to yourself. Yeah? You have your own way of communicating, your own way of doing things, and stick to your main topic and just push through and be consistent. And I'm pretty sure you will build the audience that you need. And we are mainly tackling here B2B companies, so you don't need 10,000 followers. If you have 200 and that are all potential customers and you only close one of them once a year, wow, you've already won. So with that, I would say we go to the last question: how to execute a webinar from A to Z. And that's something that I will very quickly cover. And before I show the slides, I will not talk through all of those points. It should be just a wake-up call that a webinar is more than just, hey, let's do a webinar and tomorrow you have it. There are a lot of things that you have to do, and there's a time frame you should stick to if you don't want to be totally stressed out. All of you who want to see or want to receive this slide deck, just let me know, you will all get it. So first one is equipment and software you need. So it seems to be obvious, but I just mentioned it anyway, because I didn't know it when I started that I need all these things, and I'm missing one of those things right now. Can you guess which one? Laura, Juntae?
You're missing the good lighting.
Exactly. I'm missing the good lightning, yeah. So, well, of course, you need a good internet connection.
Encoder,
yeah.
Maybe an encoder, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. Maybe too. You need a good microphone. With Juntae, you see it, and it looks cool. So you can even make it look cool. With a microphone and microphone holder, you need a good webcam. You need good lighting. And in terms of webinar software, we got one question with regards to Zoom and the recent concerns about security. I mean, just Google webinar software and you will find like 5 to 10 different options to use out there. We are sticking to Zoom because we have nothing confidential here. So if someone wants to hack into our webinar and listen to it, they're invited to do so. But yeah, that is your question, Michael. And the very simple answer, there are other tools, but maybe Juntae and Laura, do you have one other favorite tool that you like to use? Just name one if you have one.
Favorite tool. I think sometimes you can do with the internet connection, like we talked about, call in on your phone for the audio and run the video on 2 different data systems. Usually phone and in-house Wi-Fi can be different systems, and that can give you better stability in your sound. As long as the sound stays constant, you're usually going to have that real-time connection with your listeners.
Okay, Juntae, do you have maybe one tool like Zoom, like a different tool you would propose to use?
I mean, I think Zoom is pretty solid. I think with regard to the security, it's more or less people having their passwords and sharing and things like that. So I don't think people are necessarily hacking into the system. They're just accessing people's attendees' passwords. But I would say one, I don't know if it's a tool necessarily, but more or less an outlet would be Eventbrite. And I'm not sure if that's in the UK, but or in Europe, but it's an outlet that I think many event goers look to. And so there's opportunities to promote your online event through Eventbrite if you haven't done so.
Awesome, thanks a lot. So let's go to the next one without like overwhelming you, but here, 2 slides. This is what we do usually to prepare a webinar for ourselves or our customers. So first, kick off with the speakers. Usually, if you want to do it in a relaxed fashion, 7 weeks before you want to have the webinar. And you get the speakers on board, you talk about what kind of topics you want to cover, and you get the main information that you need to set up the landing page later. So that's in the setup phase, which basically is important to set up everything you need in order to start the marketing phase. So set up the landing page, the calendar invites and everything you need. Then the webinar, the marketing phase starts 4 weeks before the webinar. And this is just a rough outline. Juntae, you already added so many other ideas for marketing your event. So you see there are a lot of things you can do. As we are mainly focused on LinkedIn offers you a lot of ways in how you can market that, and we really like this a lot because it's for free and you don't even have to pay for it. You just have to put in the work. Next one is, well, the hot phase, we call it, 1 week before the webinar. So you should have a test one because you never know if the stability of the internet is good, if the sound system is good enough, and all these little things. It's better to do it 1 week before the webinar than just 20 minutes before it, just so that you can have a really, really, like at least from sound and how do you say, sound and picture, a good webinar. Follow-up phase is what happens after the webinar. And there are a lot of ways that we already talked about. We do the very simple way of just sending a follow-up email. That's the least thing we do. And everybody is able to enter and look up the recorded event. And we already talked about what you can do out of a long format like a webinar. You can create a lot of different content snippets, and this alone is something where you can like really, out of a 1 hour webinar, you can create content for a whole week or a whole month, depending on how often you post. And I would say that's already everything I wanted to show on a very high level. If anyone is interested in more depth from any one of our speakers, you can ask questions now. I would say we add 5 more minutes. Is this okay with you, Juntae and Laura?
Sure, that's fine.
Sure,
5 minutes. Fine. Yeah, we cannot answer everything, but we'll do the following. If you add your email address to your question, we will get back to you for sure and answer your question. So let me see. So one question from someone who's anonymous is, hi, how much effort / knowledge should be showed or used for a free webinar? Who wants to answer this one?
Well, usually we try to provide as much value as we can. Nowadays, I think there's just a trend to not hold back any information. We essentially want to wow the attendee and with as much information and be very thorough so that they hopefully convert to clients or customers. That's the overall goal, I think.
It's a little bit like dating, huh? It depends on how much effort you put in, and that's what you get out of it. If you want to build a personal relationship, well, you should invest something in it. So I think that speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm. I would say here, though, if people haven't done virtual events before, there can be that hurdle of, oh, I don't know how to do this. It won't be perfect. It won't be perfect, and therefore I won't do it at all. And so you never get anywhere with it. I would say, if you have something of value, check it maybe with a few of your customers and see if they're interested in it. If they say, wow, that sounds really fascinating. I mean, that's how the beginning of this webinar started. We had some discussions about what would be useful, what some of the new issues are right now, and thought, oh, actually we could add some value there with some help. And then give it a try and shorten it. Don't stretch it out. If you don't have so much you're certain is a wow factor, then say it in a shorter amount of time. Also fine.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. We got one more tip for a webinar tool. I think most of us know it. It's called WebEx.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is another tool. Thanks a lot for that one. And another question from Malcolm about, I just read it. I see you all using different audio setups. How much difference does the quality of sound make to uptake of the message through webinars? I mean, Juntae, we see what you're using.
I don't have data on that. I know just phone call.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, ask that question again.
Sorry. So the question is basically about the audio setup. What kind of audio setup should you use, or how much effort should you put into the audio setup?
I think there should be a great deal of effort put into the audio setup because people seem to be more forgiving if the video is a little bit grainy, but as long as the audio is crisp and clear, then that's the most important thing. As well as, if you may have, some very powerful or, aesthetically pleasing slides, right? Some nice slides. And then with nice audio, that can work great for a presentation. So focus on audio. One of the things you're able to do is either have a microphone, which is a condenser mic. That works well. Usually the newer webcams have high definition audio and recording. So as long as you essentially have a good webcam, you should be pretty safe.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm also using, for example, I use Rode, R-O-D-E, as my audio setup. I hope everybody's understanding me well and fine, but I'm quite happy with it. We got another tip from Geraldine for another event platform. It's called InEvent, INEventAlltogether.com. Thanks a lot for that one. And with that, I would say we are through. And I'm super happy that you provided such a lot of value, Laura and Juntae. Hope that you will be willing to join for another webinar. I can ask, please, all listeners and seers, let us know what you like most and where you would like to deep dive, because maybe I can convince Laura and Juntae to come back for a deep dive session in one of those topics.
Ah, the series. That's the real art. We're not going to create a series. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a virtual stage with you, and also catch some new ideas and how-tos from both of you as well. It's been a pleasure, and none of us know exactly how this is all supposed to happen because it's a new territory, right? It's fairly new. Juntae, you've been in this for a while, and it will evolve and we'll be a part of it instead of lagging behind. So I'm excited to be here and talking about this. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Sammy. And as Laura mentioned, this is an evolving process, right? And so it's probably one of the main reasons why you should continue to come on these series, to keep up to date on what's going on in the industry with regard to virtual events and so on. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Juntae at digitaldelane.com is my contact. At Juntae DeLane, if you just try to search my name, I'm probably going to pop up because I have a very unique name. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. I will share with everybody who gave us their email address. I will share this presentation, so everybody will have the contact details, and feel free to reach out to Juntae and Laura. I'm sure they are happy if you do so.
Yes, absolutely. This is going to be part of our marketing toolkit, our sales enablement toolkit. It's here to stay, and we'll be looking at this more and more in the future.
And it's fun. So it's not as hard as people might think. If you invite the right people, you have a lot of fun. Next time we do it with a beer. Awesome. Thanks a lot. And for you, Juntae, have a nice day. And Laura, what time is it now? Midday, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have evening now. I'm going for evening one now. Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Bye.
Okay. Bye, Juntae.
Bye now. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
Sammy. Bye-bye.